a speaker series hosted by the Worldwide College of Business at Embry-Riddle. This year, for those of you who might have attended in the past, this year yet, the Vantage point is centered on the intersection of people, technology, and business innovation, looking closely at how these forces are shaping the future of aviation. As the industry undergoes transformation, the choices made today will define how we connect communities, sustain supply chains, and advance global trade. So today, we're honored to present this special event in partnership with the International Air Cargo Association, TIACA, is the acronym, is a global nonprofit trade association that represents and unites all parts of the air cargo industry. In today's event, we'll be exploring the strategic role that air cargo plays in enabling commerce and strengthening resilience worldwide. Speaking on this topic, I'm thrilled to welcome two distinguished leaders of TIACA, Glyn Hughes, Director General of TIACA, and Menen, a pioneer figure in air cargo and aviation logistics. First, about Glyn. Glyn has dedicated more than 40 years to advancing the air cargo sector, beginning with British Caledonian and later serving as IATA's Global Head of Cargo. Today, as the first Director General of TIACA, he's leading efforts to champion innovation, sustainability, and global collaboration across the industry. Ram, many of you hopefully might remember from the last Vantage Point, well known to us as well as to everyone else in aviation. Welcome back again, Ram. I was part of the founding team of Emirates Airlines. You know that little bit of an airline in the Middle East known as Emirates. So he was part of that. Led its cargo division for decades. As a founding member and past leader of TIACA, he has long been at the forefront of shaping the air freight industry and continues today as an influential voice in aviation logistics strategy. We're truly delighted to have both of you. Welcome to you both. And now, joining them to guide today's conversation is our own Professor Bob Walton. Dr. Walton will lead us into the discussion highlighting the insights and experiences of our featured speakers. And on that note, we invite you to be part of the dialogue. Please submit your questions through the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and we'll work to address as many as possible. Without any further delay, Bob, Glyn, and Ram, the screen is yours, and to our guests, welcome again. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dean Sharma. Great to be with you guys. I'm sitting here with Ram in the same room here, and Glyn's in a different area of the world, but I appreciate you guys coming in and giving your insight today. Let's go and get started. I guess before we get started, actually, Glyn, if you want to maybe give everybody a little bit of overview real quick on TIACA.
Great, thank you, Bob, and it's a pleasure to be addressing your audience today and to be sharing the screen with two such eminent individuals as yourself and Ram and Dean Sharma. Thank you for that great introduction. TIACA, as you mentioned, the International Air Cargo Association, is unique in the sense that it's a global association that is horizontal in the sense that it represents an industry rather than a sector. Most people are familiar with IATA, the International Air Transport Association, which is vertical, that represents airlines, ACI, Airport Council International, vertical representing the airports. We are horizontal, so we represent airlines, airports, freight forwarders, trucking companies, manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, IT companies, shippers. Anybody that's involved in the air cargo industry has a home in TIACA. And the value of that is the collective voice represents the true concerns and issues of the industry. So when we go and speak with governments and other international bodies, we can do so on behalf of the entire industry in a very neutral fashion.
Great, thanks. And of course, the series that we're hosting here is hosted by Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And so let's go ahead and jump into the first question here and see who wants to do that. Let's look in the past for the moment as we get started here. How has air cargo reshaped global trade patterns in the past decade? And what role does it play in connecting economies that rely on fast, reliable access to international markets? Ram, you wanted to start with that?
Sure. I mean, the air cargo industry in itself really came into its own around 1980. That's when the deregulation happened in the United States. And as we went on, around the end of the 80s was when we were forming TIACA, and we were also trying to bring all the people together. And we started talking to the universities and everybody else to look at the industry as a whole. And that's where when we started looking at the supply chain management. And within the supply chain management, as a science of inventory management and everything, the other components within the supply chain started gathering momentum, we realized that the higher cost of air cargo actually adds economies to the overall supply chain. From that point onwards, everything changed. And of course, that was also the time when there was global outsourcing happening into China and other places. So now suddenly, I mean, going from regional, it started going long hauls, and that is probably the biggest change from 1980s to 1990 to what we are today. It was just a learning curve for all of us while you were driving the air cargo industry. But all in all, it was the science of supply chain management and the inventory management within that, which boosted the logistics and transportation within the supply chain.
I think just real quick for the people that are out there that aren't familiar with the air cargo industry as much as some may be, is that the nice thing about air cargo, of course, it's a very fast mode of transportation. You can very quickly move products from wherever they're being produced to the location, so you can reduce inventories. There's lots of advantages to that. You can reduce inventories. If all of a sudden there's some economic shifts around, it can really kind of fill in and help to make sure you balance the products where you need to get them in the world. And it's one of the benefits of it. It is the most expensive mode of the five modes of transportation, but there are some real advantages for a company. Glyn, did you have something you wanted to add?
Absolutely. Just extending on what Ram was saying, which is a perfect illustration as really of the success or the beginning of the success. I'd like to just throw some extra numbers in there. You know, since the expansion of the global economy in, let's say, the late 80s through the 90s, you know, China's ascension to the WTO really giving a boost for that, the World Bank has undertaken a study which illustrates that over 1 billion people globally have been lifted out of poverty into the affluent middle classes as a direct consequence of the expansion of the global economy. So that means logistics and everything that Ram talked about in terms of supply chain management collectively across the modes really created that success story. Then when you look at air cargo's role within that, air cargo, and this leads exactly to your point, Bob, is that it's the most expensive mode of transport. We're proud of that because we're moving the most expensive cargo. Air cargo today transports 35% of global trade by value. Every year, that's over $8 trillion worth of goods moves in the bellies of passenger aircraft and the main decks of the freighters. And yet, volume-wise, it's about 1%. So you look at the correlation between value and volume, and you see that it's the most expensive, the most time-sensitive, the most crucial products fly via air. And I'm sure as we go through the discussion, we'll actually delve into that a little bit more.
Everything else from Ed?
No,
Okay.
That's it. I mean, in fact, I mean, to be very honest, I mean, it was TIACA which actually got the academia involved in creating programs. I was there with TIACA at that time. We Concordia in Canada and Cranfield in
the UK.
UK.
Mm-hmm.
They were the first two that came on board, and the Rotterdam University, who already had courses on logistics. That's how we started pushing the academy to start running programs, hoping that we would get qualified people coming into our business, because everybody in the cargo business at that time, we realized, came in there by default. But the funny thing was, We got them all graduated, but they all went to different industries.
And of course, always retaining good help or
Yeah.
good knowledge is difficult in this industry. Let's go and move on to the next question. I guess I'm going to call this the kind of the elephant in the room question here. Now let's look at some of the current geopolitical tensions that are going on in the world. And how is this current trade war reshaping air cargo routes and market opportunities, both within the United States and also worldwide? Of course, the air cargo industry is a worldwide industry, and so one piece of it, when it gets impacted, impacts another part of it. But how is that? What's the kind of current market opportunities for an air cargo or for air cargo companies in today's market? Glyn, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating and great question. And we could probably spend an hour just on that one topic. So I'll try and keep a couple of things brief just to kind of get some salient points. If you look, first of all, I'm going to go back 3 or 4 years. China today accounts for 27% of global production. It's the powerhouse factory of the world. We know that. And we were actually seeing 3 or 4 years ago a policy coming into play with a lot of manufacturers of China plus one, de-risking supply chains. Post-COVID, when China was one of the last countries to reopen up, a lot of supply chains were under pressure because too much production was centered in that area. So we saw a lot of focus on nearshoring, friendshoring, best shoring. Now there's another factor that's still going on, and that's why we're seeing a lot of things moving to Vietnam, to Malaysia, not away from China, it's just as well as. Now we're actually seeing, as a result of the current presidential administration focus on restructuring the global trade environment through the use of, and I'm going to use the term reciprocal tariffs, but they're not reciprocal tariffs, but they're phrased as such, but use of tariffs and other measures to restructure how international trade works. We're actually seeing a new phenomenon that's coming up, which is called USA plus one, that manufacturers are looking for secondary markets. The US will continue to be the world's largest economy, but if you look at what's happening in India, for example, Modi has said to the garment industry, I will find you 40 new markets to de-risk and reduce our reliance on trade with the US. So from an air cargo perspective, we live in the world of complexity equals our bread and butter. This is what this industry is designed for. And as Ram mentioned in his earlier remarks about air cargo is global, there's always a great phrase. I wish I'd have come up with this, but I don't know who. But a famous man once said, it could have even been Ram, you build 3 kilometers of a highway, you can move cargo 3 kilometers. You build 3 kilometers of train track, you move cargo 3 kilometers. You build 3 kilometers of a runway, you can move cargo anywhere. So as supply chains shift and as they evolve, the air cargo industry is the prime mode of transport to actually support that. And certainly when manufacturers are looking for new production centers to connect with new consumer centers, air cargo is actually could be facing the next 3 to 5 years of phenomenal growth in support.
Yeah, to me, I mean, trade is like water. It finds its own levels. I mean, Glyn mentioned about the trade war that's going on, the effects of that and on different routes. Looking at the week 36 numbers of this year, the China-US market has gone down quite a bit for the air cargo business, but China-Europe has gone up quite a bit. It's exactly the same thing with India. Now, there has been overall growth in these markets, but it's just that it's going into different places. Now, if you look at the air cargo industry from the transportation point of view, there are 2 types of capacity that's put to the market. One is through the passenger bellies, which is roughly about 50 to 55% of the total movement. The other one is the freighters. Now, the freighters are a lot more flexible, and I call it their conveyor belts. So we can actually move that very, very quickly from one route to another route. And this is what is happening. That Glyn talked about the restructuring of the world trade in itself. And within that restructuring, you actually see that the freighter movements are now going into different regions. Now with the nearshoring and the inshoring, that is also bringing in a regional movement of cargo around. So we are actually going through an evolutionary period. Now, is this going to be permanent? I mean, in terms of the trade war, etc., I don't think so. I think it's just a temporary blip that we are going through. This blip is, of course, is going to have a positive effect overall. And exactly what Glyn said, new markets are coming up. Like Modi said, I mean, now I'll find you different markets for the garment industry, the rag trade. Yeah, this is what's going to happen, and this is going to stay.
Yeah, and if I may just add one thing to what Ram said there, which is so important. Those freighters, there is one very significant difference in the commercial aviation space between passenger and cargo. Passengers like to go away and come home again. They are bidirectional. Cargo is unidirectional. So therefore, to be able to deploy the assets of the freighters in an efficient manner, you need to have a good, what we call economic regime, which is the establishment by ICAO of traffic rights and traffic freedoms, which allows the liberalization of air cargo differently from the way that the passenger industry is very much controlled by my country wants to limit the number of seats of other carriers coming in. Air cargo is different because air cargo is talking about the ability for my country to export my product. I don't care what metal it goes on, as long as my cargo can actually leave. So it's really important that there is a very flexible and liberalized environment in place so that those carriers who've invested in those freighters can move them around. And Bob, could I just say one more thing about, I agree 100% with Ram that I think this is a temporary blip, but sometimes temporary blips can have quite significant impacts. Right now, one of the executive orders that was issued on July 31st, which has had a severe consequence on e-commerce coming via parcel post. Because what the executive order does is it actually obligates the airline, the carrier, to collect the tariff from whomever. But if you look at the parcel world, the carrier has no relationship with the person sending the parcel and no relationship with the person receiving it. So the carriers are unable to collect that tariff. So they've actually had to embargo the transport of parcels. That parcel post then has actually been communicated to the postal administrations around the world. And I believe there's 90 today who've embargoed post or parcels by post to the US. Now, this is having far-reaching effects. This is not about addressing a fentanyl issue. This is not about addressing counterfeit products, etc. This is now impacting gifts. It's impacting crucial movement of cargo and general e-commerce. So I agree with Ram. A lot of what's happening today is to seek a political means, and that we will see a softening of some of the more rigid policies that have been put in place.
I just want to add on something. This is going back to the beginning of your question. The air cargo has got a direct relationship with the world economy. Till about 2008, the growth in air cargo was 2.5 times the growth of the world economy. So when we used to get the air cargo rate, we knew what the growth in GDP would be worldwide. So that relationship sort of broke a little bit in 2008, and that's when we started seeing the birth of the e-commerce, or rather the push of the e-commerce coming in. So that has now made that relationship, the GDP to air freight growth, a bit fluid. So we're still trying to find that balance. And with the current trend of this, what do you call it, the trade wars, that could change. So right now, it's all a question of old rules don't apply and the new rules are not written.
Yeah, historically, air cargo has always been kind of an indicator of the future of the economy, whether it was going up or down. And it's been fairly consistent for years, as you were discussing, but a little bit of that's broken. Let's stay with this whole idea, again, just for you guys, I'm not sure if you've never heard of the term nearshoring. That's where companies are now coming back to their home country. So this is probably mostly a U.S. audience. So there was a lot of companies that have moved offshore, had moved to other countries of the world. But as time has gone on through COVID, through some of the tariffs, and that's I guess the intent of the tariffs is that you would have more and more the companies would come back and set up the factories back in the United States in this example. So that's what we call by nearshoring. And you talked a little bit about the e-commerce growth. But how is that really going to be, or how's the air cargo industry going to adopt to this? Even though it may be a short-term blip, how's the adoption going to go on, or the adoption going to go on for that? Glyn?
Well, e-commerce is actually today accounting for about 25% of total tonnage that's moved via air cargo. It's growing double digits every year because it has that unique phenomenon that it's not about price, it's about time. You know, it's about the Gen Zs, the millennials. I have two research students, I call them children, who I actually watch their consumer patterns and behaviors changing from when I was their age. They're much more aware of the value of their time. So they actually prefer to shop 365, 24 hours a day, every day of the year. And the convenience of getting things shipped. So e-commerce is a perfect example of what Ram was saying of the air cargo's leveraging point, which is anywhere to anywhere in a quick fashion. So the growth and explosion of e-commerce is definitely going to continue, despite what we would call de minimis. De minimis levels are the levels that governments establish where you could actually bring in cargo or bring in goods and not pay duty. A bit like when we fly the duty-free allowance when we come in on holiday. The US had it at 800. That's actually now effectively been removed. Europe, it's 150. That's probably going to be removed down to something significantly lower. But that's not having a detrimental impact on demand, because demand is much more about, I want these goods. If I'm only going to get them at 20% less than I could have paid in a store rather than 40% less, I'm good with that because it's time and convenient. So e-commerce is a real mainstay of the future growth of the air cargo industry.
The other dimension to what Glyn said is from anywhere to anywhere, and you can pay from anywhere. And that is a major factor. So now suddenly we have pulled down all the barriers. So that's why the movement of e-commerce sort of makes a lot more sense, and it's getting a boost.
Except for now, of course, what you brought up a minute ago, Glenn, was the embargo on, or I guess the I don't know the proper term, but with the de minimis, where we're going to have to start, the postal services are going to have to start collecting that tax or that tariff. And of course, we live, Ram and I both live in Europe, and of course, our country that we're in has the post has sent out a message that we no longer take post going to the U.S. So we can't even ship presents to our families, as you were pointing out. And so that's going to impact the e-commerce business, I think, as we go forward. I do have one question. Just a reminder, everybody, if you have a question, go ahead and ask it. I'm going to kind of wait to the end to answer all those, but we do have one question that just came in that's actually germane to this comment. So let me, or this discussion. So let me read this and let's see, get your take on it. Could the end of the de minimis exemption in the U.S. have an impact on the integrator business, in particular versus other freight carriers that focus on larger, higher volume consignments?
Can I take?
Yeah.
Sure. Yes, definitely. It's going to have an effect. The first effect that we are actually seeing, where the shipments used to move, packages were moving. Now, people have started consolidating cargo. So then deconsolidation at the destination and moving it internally. So, but although the integrators might have an effect on one side, but they gain it on the other side.
I can't add anything more than that. As Ram said before, this industry, cargo flows are like water. Where there's a challenge, they will find an opportunity and things will move and shift.
Great, thanks. And like I said, there are some other questions. We will try to get to those before the end. Let's talk a second about sustainability. Sustainability is always a question within the aviation industry. And of course, it's becoming more and more central to global commerce. I'm like you, like the examples you were using, even though I'm not part of the Gen Z, is a lot of times just easier to get online and order something. And I'm not necessarily going there for the price savings as much as I am the convenience. But as we're going on as we're looking at sustainability and more demand for e-commerce, what practical steps are cargo operators taking, such as sustainable aviation fuels, new aircraft technology, optimized routing, anything to reduce that environmental impact they might have?
Let me kick off that one. Well, first of all, yes, 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 and yes. Everything that could be done is being done. Let me first tackle with the sustainable aviation fuel. The industry has set an objective to be net zero by 2050. To achieve that target, it's anticipated 65% of that will come through the use of sustainable aviation fuel. For your audience that may not have heard that term, SAF, it's really about it's the cyclical aspect of carbon. So it's carbon capture, carbon storage, turn that into fuel, and then re-release it. So it's not a net increase like it is burning fossil fuels. Right now, sustainable aviation fuel, global production is about 1% of total fuel. It's going to need about 8,000 refineries around the world at an investment level of over $2 trillion to get to the level required to produce the sustainable aviation fuel the industry will need. Today, it's 3 times the price of jet kerosene. It's crucial that governments, the investment community, and effectively the oil industry invest significantly now to make sure that we can actually achieve the right level of production that's going to be necessary to achieve that target. All the other aspects, if you look at what the aircraft fuel efficiency measures, the paint they're using, the design, if you look at the wing designs now, you had winglets a few years ago. Now you've got swept wing, you've got all sorts of other incremental improvements in design of aircraft, which reduces drag, which reduces fuel burn, perfect descent, perfect operations. There's lots of things, electrification of ground vehicles, etc. All of those make changes, but it's the propulsion which is where the real focus is. Just to give you some numbers though, aviation accounts for 2.5% of global emissions. Of that, air cargo accounts for about a quarter. So we're about 0.6% of global emissions, of the total emissions, greenhouse gases, for example. Now, I'm not saying that as it's a small number, it should be ignored, because every industry should focus on reducing its impact. But there is another side of this, and we quite often get challenged by environmental groups that, oh, you should never fly air cargo anything, you should never fly flowers, etc. You have to look at the social impact. There's 18 million people in Africa whose livelihoods are based on the fresh growing of flowers and the movement of those flowers to Western auctions. That means there's 18 million families who are putting food on their table and sending their children to school because of this global supply chain. If you grew these flowers in Western Europe in wintertime, you'd have to have artificially heated greenhouses. You'd have to use chemical-based pesticides, fertilizers, and the social impact of those markets, which are growing these things naturally and freshly, etc., would be devastated. So we have to look at reducing our environmental impact, but also constantly making ourselves aware of the social impact and the value, as Ram said, of connecting anything to anywhere.
I would go on to what Glyn said was absolutely spot on in what's happening on the ground. My view, SAF, that is not going to be the only way forward, because we just don't have the capability to supply as per the demand. I'm personally involved in a few projects. One of the areas which is going to improve the fuel burn is the blended wing airplanes. And within the blended wing airplanes, I mean, you have the capability of going a hydrogen, or you can go SAF, of course, and you can go electric. But the challenges are with the electric is the range issue. The challenge with the fuel cell hydrogen project is that the storage of hydrogen, I mean, it needs, it's got to be cryogenically stored. And these are challenging because these things compromise the range. What we are looking for is a long-range, sustainable propulsion.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I've seen, and I will encourage Embry-Riddle to perhaps take a look at this. To me, I have seen something on the ground in the trucking side of the business where they are using a propulsor, which is methanol fuel cell, as a charger to the battery on board.
Mm.
So, and methanol is very readily available, and it's zero emission. And the fuel cell is exactly the same as they have developed for the hydrogen. It's just that instead of hydrogen, you're pumping in methanol. And the methanol itself, the fuel cell itself drives a small propulsor, which is just a battery charger, I mean, to simplistically put, which then keeps the battery charged. So what you need is you can actually reduce the size of the battery that you carry on an airplane to about 45 minutes of contingency, as per the ICAO rules. And you continuously keep on charging that battery. Methanol tankage, methanol is not sensitive to temperatures or anything. It's just that the density of the methanol is just 1/3 of the kerosene, but that's not an issue because you're not running a massive engine with that. So it's something that Embry-Riddle perhaps might want to look at and develop. This is happening on the ground. And nobody has actually looked at in the air, the application in the air. And perhaps that could be a great way forward for the sustainable fuel.
Now, of course, the nice thing about SAFs is they're pretty much a drop-in replacement in that we've already kind of got the infrastructure built. We've got the pipelines, we've got the, we got the tankage and stuff like this. So, okay, you may have to change gaskets, but it's reasonably a drop-in replacement, other than the fact, like you were saying, Glyn, you've got to build so many factories to actually produce it. Once it's produced, we're kind of used to handling liquid products like a fuel, where with the other ideas that we have, which I think we probably will settle on something other than SAFs in the long range, that entire infrastructure will have to be built by the industry also.
Yeah, SAF will probably be one of the components of the propulsion systems for the future. But it cannot, it just doesn't have the capability to be the one.
No, I agree with you. We can't rely on it exclusively, just because if you look at the pathway, there's 120 something different ways of producing SAF. About 30 of them are considered economically viable, from used cooking oil as one of the obvious versions up to agricultural byproducts, for example. But to Ram's point, if we sit as an industry and say, well, let's just wait for the SAF refineries and they don't come, we don't have a plan B. Plan B has to be alternative propulsion systems.
Yeah, and then airplanes like what Nautilus Jet Zero is doing with the blended wing technology, that reduces the consumption of fuel by almost 40 to 45% compared to traditional airplanes.
Great, thank you. Let's take a break and a little bit of break and ask a couple questions here. We've got some questions coming in. I do have one or two kind of questions I want to get to you guys before we get done here, but let's see what some of the people have asked. One of them is, with the upward trend of air cargo, what does this mean to the aircraft OEMs, the original equipment manufacturer side? Would it mean more demand for aircraft that can be converted to cargo or to freighters? Do you still see a 747 or the 380 sustain its demand because of this opportunity?
Ram, you've bought planes. I have models. You have the real stuff.
Yeah, no. Again, just go back to the question.
Hold on one second here. The trend. Okay, what does this mean for the aircraft OEM side?
Got it. Yeah. There are two things. Usually for cargo, it's what we call freighter later. The airplanes come in as a passenger airplane and then get converted to cargo after its passenger life, and then you get airplanes that are quite economical to operate from a capital investment. But this is going to change right now because of the environmental issues. So there's going to be more pressure on parking those old airplanes. 747s, they are the best cargo airplanes ever built, and they will always be the best. But their lives are also limited as we go forward in about 15 to 20, 30 years. So this is where you are going to see the OEMs. Basically, at the moment, they're still working with passenger airplanes like the The best airplanes right now are 777s and the A350 freighter, which are coming in to take the pressure off the Boeing 747s. But there are companies like Nautilus, there are companies like Jet Zero. They will be coming with this newer generation airplane. The original airplane manufacturers like Airbus and Boeing, they really haven't done anything specifically to address the airplanes of the future. But there are several other projects which are going on. Recently, Beta has been, they have had their certification for the small airplane, the electric airplane. So these are the new generation airplanes which are going to come up. They are going to be the OEMs of the future.
Yeah, and just to add some of that, Boeing and Airbus do their freight forecast and their projections going forward. And if you look now, the order book for new production freighters falls way short of the number of retirements that's going to happen in the next 20 years. The heyday, as Ram said, back in the 80s and the 90s, the number of 747-400s, and then of course the Dash 8s came through, 777 production freighters, the MD-11s, there's 96 of them now which have finished their usable life, waiting for retirement. But there are delays with the new 777 8F freighter and the A350F program, which means that there is strong demand for conversion still. There's about 7 new conversion lines for the 777-200 coming up around the world because there's a lot of feedstock. And of course, and Ram's quite right that the environmental challenge, and this is something where we also need to kind of change the narrative, because a passenger aircraft, 15, 18 years at maximum, usually be 12 to 15 years, it's kind of written off its passenger life. If you then go and put it out to scrap, then you've got an awful lot of carbon invested in that production. So we actually call it not a conversion program, but a recycling program. So air cargo is actually engaging in a significant relifing. So they call it redeliveries, and it's giving an extra 10, 15 years usable life to those products. Conversion costs run much less than a production freighter, which means, again, if you look at Africa, which only accounts for 2% of global volumes of air cargo, you can't really afford to fly a brand new 777 freighter into that, or a Dash 800 74-8, because the cost of that is too much. You do need to fly older 76s, sometimes even older than that, aircraft, because the operational costs are lower and then more economically viable. So this again is one of the very important topics that when we get challenged by entities out there that saying the old aircraft, and in fact, I had a disagreement with IATA. IATA ran an article once that said air cargo is holding back industry sustainability efforts because of the average age of a passenger plane is 9 years, cargo plane is 29 years. We said you have to rescope it. It's that recycling, and it's that ability to have an aircraft fit for all purposes to connect markets with production. And this is where I think that Ram's absolutely right. New entrants will come in to fill different sectors. You know, the 767 production has to finish because they can't meet ICAO standards. That leaves a huge hole. The A330 conversion doesn't adequately fill it. So Nautilus and other manufacturers out there are going to jump in. Beta Technologies, it's a beautiful aircraft. It's 600 kilo payload over 600 nautical miles. That's going to create new markets. You know, it's actually going to create new opportunities. And I think that's also another area of excitement over the next few years, is the new OEMs that will come up. The established ones will still be there for big freighters. Embry-Riddle is actually just entering into the freighter business with their E190, 195 conversion program. It's a very low cost conversion. They take out one whole panel, stick in another replacement panel with a door in it, and you've got a 14-ton payload. They're looking to try and enter the feeder sector for the integrators and others. So again, I think it's an exciting period of time coming up.
Just a point. In terms of the freighter later, the conversion of passenger airplane to cargo airplane, any airplane built beyond 1992, 1993, they don't convert into freighters that well. When you convert them, it's got its challenges in payload, the range, etc. Purely because in the olden days, the rule of the thumb was whatever the passenger payload was, double it, and that was the payload on a cargo version. That's gone purely because these airplanes, since about I would say about the A330, A340s, Boeing 777s, they were already optimized for weight at the beginning of the passenger life.
Mm-hmm.
So when you convert it into a cargo airplane, because there's a difference between passenger loads and the cargo loads. Passenger loads are fairly symmetrical across the airplane. The cargo loads tend to be asymmetrical. So that means you need to strengthen the landing gear and the wing roots and the whole area to be able to cater to the asymmetrical loads. So when you convert, for example, the A3 777-200, if you the production version of it carries about 106 tons, but the freighter, the converted version, just carries about 80 tons. So you can see the delta there, and from environmental position, you're burning more fuel to carry that cargo. So there will be pressure on what airplanes can be converted in the future. The A300, 777-300, the big twin, has just been certified and started flying. So those, again, I mean, you got the volume, but you don't have the payload. So these are the challenges that have to be addressed to be environmentally friendly as we go forward.
Thank you for that. Let's go ahead and jump back to a couple questions here, change up a little bit. We got some more questions coming in. I don't want to get too far behind it. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. If we have any left over, we'll get to you afterwards, though. But one of the questions that came in actually earlier in it was, as the air cargo industry continues to evolve post-pandemic and increasing pressures from digitalization, sustainability, geopolitical shifts, what key skills or competencies do you believe are currently lacking among new entrants in the market or recent graduates? And what advice would you give to future leaders trying to bridge that gap? So basically, I'm a student, I'm getting ready to go out into the world. What is the industry looking for? What type of skills do I need to have to when I go out into the market?
Yeah, go on, Glyn.
Well, I let me jump off because I'm speaking to a lot of industry now about where is the shortfall. The shortfall is very much in the world of digital, data analytics, data mining, artificial intelligence, blue sky thinking, innovative, robotics, automation, cool tech. I mean, almost every area. You know, Ram just talked about, if you look at the notion of just in his last answer, where he's talking about payload, range, conversions, cost, that all of those require real significant thinking. I don't want to sound negative about the passenger industry. Passenger industry is, can you count? Yes, well, that's how you load a passenger plane. You count, and a computer tells you where they should sit. We say the average passenger is 75 kilos and their bag is basically 25 kilos. Very easy. Cargo is not like that. Whatever you think, if cargo is not about boxes, it's moved on. It's about the emotions inside the boxes. You know, when I joined this industry, it was a square box. We moved from A to B. Didn't really worry about time. Now you're moving things that impact people's lives. It could be life-saving drugs. It could be the latest smartphone, which keeps a kid from not being ostracized by its friends because they got the latest version of the iPhone. That's what my kids always told me. They had to have the newest immediately, else nobody would talk to them. Air cargo is enabling all of that. So air cargo industry today is impacting lives. So I would say that any young professionals out there, if they want to have an impact, if they want to really create value, the air cargo industry is for them. If they want a 9-to-5 job where every day is the same, go somewhere else. That's not this industry. This industry, what you think it's going to be tomorrow, it's not going to be like that.
Part of the industry, air cargo industry, is also belt and braces. But one of the skills that the new graduates can actually bring into the air cargo industry is that it's a blend of industrial engineering and perhaps information technology to create what we need. Okay, let me step backwards one step. Air cargo industry has been very slow in digitizing or digitalizing. But now after all these years, they are going into the digitizing and digitalizing mode. But that is not what the air cargo industry wants. This is not what any industry in the world needs at the moment. You have technology. How do you leverage that technology to transform the business that you're doing? So there, right now, what we need is the skills of people who would just think differently and don't automate what we have been doing, but create new processes, simplify everything. And I always say this, keep it simple. We complicate life. So sometimes you need to just take everything back to base zero and rebuild. I think we are standing at that point at the moment where the new graduates who are coming in can probably help the industry into transforming themselves into more efficiency, like what the Amazons have done.
I guess
They have simplified buying. Why not simplify transportation?
I think that's a kind of along the same line of that is, we've talked from the student side. What's the industry doing though? Maybe Glyn, you're the best one. What's the industry doing and human resource companies within the industry doing to also encourage people to come into the industry?
That's a great question as well, because, to the point that Ram was making is we do need people to effectively reshape the future of this industry. And what I quite often will say when I'm talking to students now is they are the ones that's going to be creating what the world looks like in the next 5, 10, 15 years, as they become the influencers, the decision makers. The logistics industry, with all due respect to people like myself and Ram, we're not of the same age group. I know it's a shock, but we're not of the same age group as the people influencing the industry, the world. So this industry needs to reflect the world to which it serves. So the industry needs to go out and have a different approach to recruitment, to attracting the next generation. We don't just go out and say, would you like to join the air cargo industry, please? We can't do that. We have to go out and say, do you want to create a better world? Do you want to create something different? Do you want to look at the sky, dream big, and deliver on those dreams? And I think that's where we take that message out. People in this industry save tens of millions of lives every year, not just humanitarian relief, but moving these drugs around, moving everything around the world. They create the world that we live in. If everybody were to look around their environment in their house, wherever they're viewing this, if they took air cargo away, they would be sitting, with all due respect, mostly not wearing clothes, with no electricity, no laptops, no smartphones, very little food on the table other than the stuff they grew themselves or locally. The world would look a completely different place. So we have to get the message out that next generation of worker, we know we're competing with some other cool high-tech industries, etc., but air cargo can be more dynamic, can offer more opportunities, can offer them the opportunities to travel around the world because everybody has different problems. I would hate to think how many miles Ram and I have clocked up over the years, but the social benefit of being able to immersively support other communities is a hugely impactful opportunity. This industry creates wonderful opportunities for people to take value. And I think the next generation of workforce want to create value. They want to develop themselves and create value for the global community. This industry supports 15 of the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals directly. Again, if you look at employment opportunities, so huge, equal opportunities. And one area which is something we talk about, pilots. The global percentage of female pilots around the world is 4.9%. Way too low. India leads the way. It has over 12% of its pilots are female, but that should be the lowest country. We shouldn't congratulate 12% as being the most leading progressive area. We should be actually saying 12% is not sufficient. So why have we not been able to attract in young women? Account for about 50% of graduates that are coming out of engineering and mathematical degrees, perfect instigations into pilot. So we have to make sure that we get the message out about every aspect of this industry, that there are opportunities for everybody, regardless of economic background, regardless of what part of the world they're from, regardless of race, religion, etc., because this industry is there supporting communities, helping communities, and making a better world. Sorry if I'm sounding a little bit too much like a political broadcast, but
no, I think Glenn, you're spot on as always. All I want to add on is about the cargo industry in itself. Now, I'm talking about the entire ocean, basically distribution. Just remember one thing: commerce will come to a grinding halt. Trade will come to a grinding halt if the distribution comes to a grinding halt. It's so cargo is basically the wheels of commerce. It's just that. I mean, Glenn, you said there will be no clothes. I can assure you, if the cargo industry is not there, people still will be wearing fig leaves and perhaps throwing stones at each other, and that will be a war.
Yep. Well, let's start. We've got about I think about 10 more minutes. If anybody has any questions, make sure you post those up. We may run out of time, but we'll try to get to those. But let's look a little bit at the outlook of the future. We talked a little bit about the sustainable aviation fuels and from the environmental impact side. But if you had to predict the defining characteristics of air cargo operation in, say, 2035, 10, 20 years down the road, what would they be? Before you answer that, for anybody that's new, I mentioned this earlier that Glyn had mentioned the Boeing and the Airbus forecast. Those are publicly available. If you're new to the industry, go out to Airbus website or go out to the Boeing website and just Google the 20-year forecast. I think Boeing actually does a separate cargo forecast also. Airbus combines the two, but those are publicly available and they put them out every year or two. And they're great information, especially for the students out there. If you're taking any of the classes, they're great information, source of information for some of your coursework. But they're great documents to read. I use them all the time. So of course they do publish what the industry or what they expect the industry is going to be like in 20 years. But if you had to look 10, 20 years down the road, what do you think are the defining characteristics of air cargo operations at that time?
Can I start? Because I like to look back to look forward. If we go back 20 years, this industry used to move desktop computers, gone. We used to move domestic printers, gone. We used to move laptops, gone. We used to move software in a box. Windows used to release their updates every year in a CD and a book that had, 60 languages in it? That was a 2.4 kilo package. We shipped millions of these around the world. CDs, DVDs, gone. Remote control, gone. Everything was gone that we used to move around. If we go back 10 years, or in fact today, the two largest shippers, individual companies that ship by volume around the world, two companies called Temu and Shein. 99% of the people who will be watching this will be very familiar with Temu and Shein. They didn't exist 10 years ago. Temu launched 2022. Shein was as a company around 15 years, but it was only about 9 years ago they really started looking at ultra fast fashion and through logistical supply chains. So if you look at the rapid change that we've experienced, I can't answer what the next 10 years, and this is to me the best advert for this industry, is all of your audience, all of your students, they have an opportunity to shape what the next 10 years looks like from the industry perspective.
I think Glyn is absolutely right. I was also going to take you back a little bit. I mean, if you go back till about 1980, only high-value goods flew by air. Then things started changing as the science of the supply chain started becoming more and more prevalent. So even low-value cargo started moving up. In the next 10 years, what's going to happen? One thing that I'm a bit disappointed, about 15 years back, I had said the 3D printing is going to change a lot. Where, I mean, I go back to the newspaper era. Newspapers were printed in London or New York somewhere, and they were just flown everywhere. And they were, so if you are in London, you're getting an American newspaper. It's 24 hours later, but things changed when they could actually do the editing in one place and publish it in various places. The same thing is going to start happening with different commodities. And I'm surprised that it hasn't already happened, because I was expecting it to happen by about 2020. But that the progress on that 3D printing has been slow. So that is going to change the dynamics of the air cargo industry in itself. The other thing that I'm going to do, so sorry, going back to the 3D printing itself. So additives is probably going to be a new commodity that we'll be looking at by coming by air, exactly like the buttons, which is a very low value, flies today. Because of the time. Time becomes the fourth dimension has got integrated with the three dimensions. So everything is fluid. So that is exactly what's happening in the inventory management. You can very clearly see that. The other thing that's going to happen by 2035 that I see as a separate branch of air cargo is going to be space cargo. I think the space industry is also accelerating in growth and development. Use of artificial intelligence is going to accelerate everything. Now, when you look at last 50 years, 60 years, we have gone from abacus to artificial intelligence. No other generation has seen that. Now apply artificial intelligence. So everything that's happened in the last 60 years is probably going to happen in the next 5. So I see this giving a boost to the space side of the business.
Okay.
So to me, that is probably going to be the future.
It's funny you kind of close with that, because I've actually got several research papers out on 3D printing and the impact of the future of air cargo. We'll see if my predictions come out correct or not, but I agree with you. I think it's moving a lot slower than it originally had planned. It's a great technology. It is going to take some of that demand away, because you're going to start producing stuff locally. I've also got a paper out on space cargo, on the movement of goods by space. And what was the third line there that you had talked about? I had something else out there. Anyway.
Bob, just whilst you're thinking of that third line, when you said that 3D printing is going to take some of the demand away, how do you think the 3D printers are going to get moved around the world?
They're going to print themselves locally.
That would be funny. That's a different dimension. That's a world I can't comprehend.
Self-replicating.
Exactly. So I think it's time for us to turn this back over. I think it's turned back over to Dean Sharma. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the comments that you made, and also thank you to everybody that's joined us. I hope you've learned something. And so, Dean Sharma.
Thank you, Bob. This was just quite exciting. I just kept listening intently. These, what the future looks like, what the work skills might look like, the reference to the gender diversity, Glyn, that you spoke of. It's amazing what we can take refuge in, as opposed to what we should take maybe refuge in. 4%, 12% even, that sounds like a lot in relation to 4%, but it's really 1 out of 10, just about in that one. So we got ways to go yet in this one. So Dr. Walton, Bob, thank you so much for facilitating today's engaging conversation. To our wonderful speakers, Glyn and Ram, twice for you now. I really, really, truly appreciate, we're sincerely grateful for your insights and for your education and guidance on this topic. So thank you both very much. Both your perspectives on the future of air cargo, global trade and innovation are totally invaluable, and your leadership continues to inspire and guide the aviation community for sure. To all of those who joined us, thank you for being part of this Vantage Point event. We encourage you to visit the Embry-Riddle YouTube channel to view the recordings of the past sessions and stay tuned for the upcoming conversations. This is sure to be a big hit on that YouTube channel. Once again, thank you to TIACA. I think I'm saying it right now. I pronounced it initially as TIACA. I think I can call it TIACA or TIACA for partnering in this event, and to everyone in our community for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at the next Vantage Point. Stay well, everyone. Thank you again, Ram. Thank you again, Glyn. Have a wonderful afternoon.